don't you have to be honest and say though? Like,
I think it's
a man with a certain level of power is attractive.
Absolutely.
Just base level.
Like more attractive. So if you take the a man has the same attractiveness, a same like body type, but he makes way more money than the next man, he'll just be way more attractive. The one who
absolutely.
makes, okay.
I knew
That's hypergamy.
That's hypergamy.
But wait, but me and my authentic true self,
Yep.
if I'm my journaling Olivia, my prayer life Olivia,
Yep.
then I'm gonna say, you know what, no. Like if I'm in my true authentic self, that doesn't bother me. Now if in my flesh, yes.
Okay.
But that will play a role.
Okay.
A big role.
So hold up. So true authentic self. Talk to me about that, because like I feel like your true authentic self is one that is not mired by society telling you that that's not real.
Yeah.
So I feel like your true authentic self is one that considers hypergamy.
Yes. Just say yes. It's okay. It's uncomfortable. But that.
Now, when we say status, what does that mean to you?
To me, status means like your place in like society. So like what you, not even like your income, like what you do, but like how you're viewed by others in society. Like, are you a part of this frat? Are you a part of this organization? Like that's status to me.
Got it.
Isn't it relative too, right? Like it's relative to where you are, because like say I'm in a high powered or upper echelon organization, then what I may view as high status is completely different from an individual who is not necessarily in a upper echelon.
Yeah, well, so I think like, but women, regardless of their status, still want the best of the best.
Yes.
Right? Like that's why you see women groupies, but you never see men groupies. Like you don't see men who groupie on Rihanna the same way as women groupie on Chris Brown.
From a like heterosexual,
not,
like I'm attracted to you, I'm trying to be
in the
with
DMs,
you in the
trying
DMs,
to hit
because
them
I
up.
definitely see
No, that
men
exists.
groupie women for sure.
Well, I guess that's
Not at the
like
same rate.
Diana or Aisha Curry,
Huh?
like the whole Aisha Curry thing.
Right. So she's not getting hit up for
Right,
being a
but
fantastic
she-
housewife.
No, I don't
But
think she's
she's
being hit up for her status. I think she's being hit up probably for her exterior assets.
Yeah.
I think she's more pissed because she ranks herself versus the women, the bad chicks that probably hit up Steph. And she doesn't think that she's as pretty as what they are. So then she becomes extremely insecure. And I'll be honest, she's a great looking woman, but compared to the women that be looking at him with the hawk eyes on the sidelines, I mean, she's not that bad.
She's not bad.
She's not bad.
Also, right,
She's a
bad
cute
is
woman.
relative.
Right.
She's not a bad.
All of this is relative.
No, it's objective. It's subjective. It's objective. It's objective on what I've seen. I mean, there's memes. There's like videos where women will
It is
hawk him
relative.
down.
I've seen like individuals who are from a, if we want to use an objective standard, would not necessarily be cute at all, that people are like obsessed with.
What's objective is how much money he makes.
Okay,
That's
yes.
objective.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
But what
and
I'm
because of
saying
that, in
is that-
hypergamist lifestyle, and for women, I feel like it's much more social status and money driven.
For sure.
than-
You can
than men.
definitely become cute.
Because of money.
Because of
But that's
No, I
That's
think you
real.
actually, but I think there's a certain amount of personality that comes with that. Like, there, not oftentimes are you going to see somebody in upper echelon organization or status be like a super nerd or like somebody that's whack.
But if you are
gonna
corny,
have
though, and you
you're
have
corny,
money,
you have money,
you have a red
it's
light,
okay.
you have a green light.
Actually, you're probably husband material.
1000%.
What I want to say is though, typically individuals that get to a certain level of power have amassed a certain level of confidence and charisma, and all of that is also attractive.
I completely agree.
So it could just
So-
be, it may not just only be status, but it may be some ancillary characteristics that go along with that.
Because in order to get to where they at, they probably have some other ancillary characteristics that got them to that position of power or that amount of wealth, right? Like someone who has attained amount of wealth, they're smart in doing something, or a fantastic entertainer, or talented in some way that can then, right? So you're willing to deal with more bullshit from that person than as opposed to, you know, someone who's a civil servant, you know, someone who works like a social worker job, making a meaningful amount of money, but not something that is considered fantastic.
I don't know that I am.
So this is why, like, dudes.
But I feel like I feel like a lot of women are. But
in,
I don't
like,
know that I am.
high school and college that are like more usually the nerds, right? Like the nerdy type dudes. They get no respect all during that time, but then there starts to be a certain switch and it's usually let me keep it funky with you. It's usually when the woman has hit what I and the community refers to as the wall, right? Like they begin to understand that their eggs are beginning to prune up, right? So they're beginning to understand that, you know, that the time is of the essence, right? Because typically what happens is like during your early 20s is the experimental phase.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like it's time for you to go above and beyond to see who you are, learn about yourself and experience. And then you might come across a Chad Tyrone that does right in that particular moment, but probably was never the best decision for you to raise kids in anyway.
Sure.
But then as that transition happens, right, and understanding that your checklist, your 100-point checklist, you know, at 22, at 25, it's about 80-point checklist. Then at 27, it's about a 60-point checklist, right? And then at 30, it's like a 20-point checklist, right? Like, and the checks begin to be, well, yeah, I don't need someone at 6'2".
Maybe it's not necessarily the amount of checks. Maybe it's just what is
each check.
What is every line item changes?
The magnitude
like
of each
the
check.
Substance of each line item, right? Like
that changes.
That changes. But I think that doesn't necessarily. It's not solely indicative on a woman feeling like she's reaching her wall. I think what happens is the older you get, your priorities change, right? And the more mature you are, and you come into an understanding of what it takes to build a life with someone, and maybe those characteristics that you had at 20 don't really fit what it takes to really build a life with someone and a future with someone, right? Looks don't really determine like how good of a father you can be. Looks don't necessarily determine how rich you can be or how much money you can make. Looks don't necessarily determine how well you're gonna love me and pour into me and build me up. So I definitely don't want to define a woman's changing or reevaluating of her checklist based on whether or not she's hit a wall or a certain age. I definitely just feel like it's because of the knowledge and the maturity that you gain as you grow older.
Okay, so are we assuming that women in their younger 20s are not mature enough to understand?
Some of them are. I think some of them are. But I think just like biologically, let me just talk to my bio major here. Like biologically, your brain is not fully myelinated until a certain age. Oh, sorry, right? So at some point,
I think you know what it is?
I'm not physically capable of it.
I think you know in your early 20s, and you choose to ignore.
No, I agree with that because I will say, like, we were in our grad programs, you were in your grad program for sure in your early 20s.
Yeah, for sure.
And you made decisions based off that truth.
Yeah.
And like, they weren't like you knew.
That they were good person.
Really make the best decisions.
I think for me it was like at the time my priority was like, who do I vibe the best with? Like we have fun together. We have a lot of fun together.
That's what matters the most.
Because that's what mattered the most to me in my 20s.
My children.
But it wasn't like. It wasn't like he's better than him. It just was like what I wanted at the time.
And who you wanted at the time necessarily didn't have the best characteristics.
No, correct.
So you would give into that you were not as mature as when you started to get older.
Or I had different priorities. I wasn't concerned with having a kid. Maybe I was, but it was it was here on my list versus here.
But you have a lot of grace. In your early 20s.
You give a lot of grace.
Because you have a lot of time.
You get the cream in the cup right there.
Like you're saying, like, okay, now we're what, 32?
Yeah.
And so my grace level is low.
It's very low.
But my grace level at early 20s is huge. Right. So then I'm like, oh, I see your potential. Maybe you'll get there. We have time.
We can build. We can work on it.
But now I don't have any more time for you. You know what I mean?
That's real.
Like,
that's super real. So,
I don't have the patience anymore. Like, there's so many other things that I have to deal with in life other than just going to school and studying and taking a test. Like now, like I have real life issues and I just do not have the time to deal with a man
So if you could go back, if you had a time machine,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you had the Chris's and the Johns back in your 20s, right? Like, and they were
intentional.
and they were.
Are you using these names? Yeah. That's weird.
They were fantastic human beings at that time. Oh, yeah. No, they don't know my name. Okay.
Are you recording?
Get in here.
Hey.
And so listen, so like if you could go back, if you had a time machine to kind of go back and then teach your younger self, and maybe it wouldn't have been anything, because what I hear is that you don't think that you were as mature, but it seems to be a women-wide thing. It is a women-wide thing that, you have an exponential amount of time, and then the things that you look for in your younger 20s to become attracted to a Chad or a Tyrone is not necessarily what's going to set you up very well into your 30s and beyond.
Right.
If the goal is to have a family, if the goal is to XYZ or whatever that, right? So like if you could go back and teach yourself something, would you?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, what would that thing be?
Boundaries.
Boundaries. Tell me more.
Boundaries are super significant.
They are.
Because there's so much that we know at an early age, and if we keep our boundaries intact, we would never have given Tyrone or Charles a chance.
Got it.
But because we kind of compromise on our boundaries, we get into things that really, like, our time is lost. Like, we waste a lot of energy, and it's really, really hard to kind of buy back that time, but we get really good lessons that we can apply later on. But I think that if I could go back, I would say, you know what, keep these boundaries. They're super significant, and like they're gonna serve me well in the future.
I feel like I think I have to take a step back from like keep your boundaries and just say have boundaries. Because I think for me in my 20s, I literally was just flying with the wind, just figuring it out and not taking a step back and saying like, you figure out what you want and then set your boundaries accordingly. I think that's one thing that I would teach. I think I have a couple things I would teach myself. I would also teach I feel like I had like a very strong super save a hoe like syndrome. And like, and let me just say this, because like you grow up in a very
we gotta get you a chair.
Yes, you
Let
need
me get a chair.
Yeah, go get a chair.
Let me find a chair. I'll be back.
Come through. It's not.
You want me to wait until the chair comes, or
No, keep going. Keep flowing in it.
This is not your typical. I didn't intro. I didn't do nothing.
we just started talking.
Alright, let me see.
All right, get in.
Alright.
It's hot over here. My goodness,
It's super hot. Yeah, I'm about to take my hoodie off. All right, so you're back. So I wanted to comment on what you just said. So I feel like a lot of what happens, especially the young women in their early 20s, and is maybe they're just not cognizant of it as it's happening.
Yeah.
But you're going for the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
So you gotta understand, when you're going for the cream of the crop or like the best in class, they have options. So when they have options and they're getting DMs or they're getting hit up, right? Like they will most likely leverage those options, right? But meanwhile, as we talked about before, like in this hypergamist mindset, you got a Charles or a John chilling off in the corner, working on his purpose, working on his why, building himself up to be the best person that he can be, right? Has the most integrity, the most this, the most that, right? And then later on, he's the one that is probably the most attractive to you, because now he has status. Now he has this, now he has that. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to comment on that real quick and get your guys' thoughts on it, because I feel like it's misdirected. Like if you try to go for like in your younger 20s, what is thought to be the best, right? Like other women think that as well.
Yeah.
Right.
I get that.
Yeah.
So I think we have to go back because we talked about this a lot. So sorry, like viewing audience. So we talked about this before the camera was on, but I think that a couple of things for me. One is like, it's a little presumptuous to say that in my 20s I was reaching for the cream of the crop. I don't think I was reaching for anything other than like who met my surface level kind of like
requirement
design. No, I don't even think requirements. I think that's too harsh of a term. I think for me it was like, do you make me like, do we have fun together? right? And then it was, okay, fine if you have a certain level of social status, that yes, that may make you even more attractive, but I don't know that that was something that was a requirement out front. Like, you have to have this, otherwise I'm not even going to spend my time with you.
Right.
Because to be honest, in your 20s, you're working on potential.
Yeah, at least.
Like, there's no factual.
No one's has a
Yeah, nobody has amassed anything yet. We're all kind of building.
What can I foresee you to be in your 30s?
That's real.
Yeah.
Like, what are you acquiring? Like, what is your potential at this time? And that could shift. You could be in law school and drop out.
Yeah. People can get stuck in potential.
You
and
could be
never
a party
make it to that
promoter
kinetic energy, right?
That's real.
Like, they have super lofty dreams and goals, and then they get caught up there because they haven't built what it needs to, like, you know what I mean? They haven't managed tasks accordingly to get to that goal, and then those goals lead to those visions and, whatever. So yes, I think in our 20s, everybody's at the potential stage. And then by like late 20s, early 30s, you start to see a separation of the crop, whereby the individuals that are making it into that, like, getting into that kinetic energy, or you're starting to see fruit, and then those individuals who are stuck in potential, and then either they make a turn down, right, and are getting worse, or they're just stagnant and right, because now you're stagnant and you're here, but I'm hitting that kinetic, and my trajectory is still going up, and it's almost like, are you at a level where I can still choose to deal with you? Because it's always a choice, right?
But for men, though, I feel like you guys remember the folks that rode with you through that 20s phase.
Yeah.
So who were the riders? Like, who were the people who sewed into me?
Well,
but at what point does it
more
become
logical thinkers?
But at what point does that become ridiculous? Right? Like, at what point is the ride just too long? Like, at some point, I can get like motion sickness here. Like, I'm sick of being in the car. I'm getting cramps.
Well, dudes don't get motion sickness because we're much more logical thinkers, right? Like we're much more kind of grounded in data and analytics and logic.
So when you say logic, you just mean like basic definition of logic.
That's why men are so
not like logic versus emotion, and logic has some sort of superior mental state versus emotional state.
Well, I think it depends how you handle your emotions, but I would argue that a lot of the difficulties that happen with our people who look like us, people in our community, is too many emotions or gut reactions are happening and are destroying those who look like us. Like, you guys heard about the Popeye chicken sandwich shooting that happened, right? Like, that's just one example, but we have them in the city that we live in, and we hear about it in the hood that you're from. Like, we've all experienced these things, right? So like, but I would argue a lot of that is emotion-based reactions that are happening from our men. And I think much more of a logic-based decision and grounding, and this is why we've lost sight of this. This is why I say, I've said this on the channel before, this is the generation of men being over-mothered and under-fathered. That's no fault to us. That was the systematic oppression, and the generational, all that shit. I mean, we don't have to get into it.
Systematic destruction of the African American community by the incarceration of the black man. I get all of that.
So if you have many single mothers doing their best to raise these men, and they don't have the groundings in what makes a man, it's very difficult to then unleash them out in the society and to have emotional communication with their next of kin, and you expect them to handle it appropriately without men solidifying how men should act. So I think it's one of the greatest travesties in America is what has happened with the drug wars in the 80s and 70s or what have you, right? Like, because it's taken a lot of those learnings out of the household, right? And women have been forced to do the best with what they could without the man in the household. Are you talking
about men who grew up in single parent households?
Yes.
Okay,
specifically because there's a single mother.
It's like 80% of them are women.
Mother.
It's single mother. Like 80% of them. Like, I think it's upward. I think it's like 85% or something like that.
Okay.
Single mother.
So we're not counting like mentorship. We're not counting like
community,
like
village men.
The support that these men tend to have from like
that's a privilege.
The exterior community.
It's a privilege if it's positive. You know, but how many times have we heard of that exterior knowledge coming from a gang member?
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no. Yeah, young men are going to be looking for a father figure wherever, and if it comes from gang, then obviously that's the downside of what that looks like.
Yeah, so.
Ooh.